Now we want to be...
Sorry. Is it weird if it comes back and we're both like...
Should I be looking...
That was weird.
Look at the camera. Okay.
What's up, Switch? I'm Leslie. This is James. And today we are talking about a topic that is literally everywhere right now because so many people are dealing with it. Anxiety.
Yeah.
Have you ever dealt with anxiety?
No. So I've never dealt with anxiety, but my wife, actually, she's been dealing with anxiety for probably the last 12 months. She's been living with it, and it's been pretty tough.
Yeah. I think one of the most prevalent times that I remember like having anxiety and fear and disappointment was like a really rough breakup that I went through in college, and oh my goodness, like it wrecked me. It literally wrecked me.
Yeah. Yep.
I remember like I would have what I thought was anxiety attacks, but I would like YouTube and like look for videos of people having anxiety attacks to confirm, because I just want to know like, how do you deal with anxiety? Like how do you deal with this?
Which I think is such a great question, because the reality is like, because the word anxiety is out there everywhere, there are so many different ways that people understand it.
Yeah.
And I think depending on how you understand anxiety, like what it really is, determines like what you do with it, how you find peace from it. Now, we want to be really clear that anxiety is a big deal. It's a real condition. It's a medical condition. So if you feel like you're dealing with it, please get the help you need. Talk to a trusted adult about what's going on in your life.
So our friend and Switch pastor, Allison McCraw, is going to help us unpack this a little bit more in a message we call Wrecked.
I'm so pumped that you are here and you are a part of Switch, because I believe it is the best place to be on a Wednesday night. And I believe that God has something great for you here. You know, when we're growing up, we all have one dream. One dream we all have. That's right. It's to go to Disney World. And last year, after 27 years of waiting, my dream finally came true, and it was magical. And while I was at Disneyland, there was only one thing I had to do, only one thing, and that was to get a picture with Ariel. Because growing up, like, Ariel was the top for me. I watched that movie on repeat. I had a cassette and a book, you don't know what a cassette is, of the sing-alongs, like, look at this stuff. Isn't it neat? Like, I knew every word by heart. And while I was in line, it wasn't just about getting this picture. Also, I settled a debate that has been going on in my heart for a long time, and that's, who is my favorite Disney princess? Is it Ariel or is it Cinderella? And in that moment, before I got that picture, I knew. Ariel is my favorite princess. And it's my turn finally, and I go over the line, and I sit down, and I'm so excited. I just want this picture. And there's like one thing I did not consider, and that she talks a lot. And it is awkward. Because we're sitting there, and she's trying to have a conversation with me as Ariel. And she's asking me things like, how far did I swim here? And all that. And all of a sudden, like, reality just punches me in the face. And I realize that I am a grown woman sitting next to another grown woman wearing a fishtail. And so I got my picture. Here's my picture. And I walk out and I leave and I say, Cinderella. Cinderella is my favorite princess. You know, growing up, adults tell us all the time, like, get ready because life is full of disappointment. And how tragic is that? Like, anytime someone would say that to me, I would think two things. One, if that's what adulthood is, no thank you. Or, I think you're doing it wrong. But when we really stop and think about it, we don't have to wait to know what disappointment is, because at some level or another, we experience it all the time. Maybe for you, you go into a new school year, a new school, and you're like, it's gonna be better this year. And so far, it's not. We get so excited about plans that we have, and we're gonna tell everybody we get to do this, and then it doesn't happen. Someone we love makes us a promise, and we think they're finally gonna come through this time, and then they don't. And at the end of the day, we're just left with disappointment. What is disappointment? The definition of disappointment is this: it's a sadness or displeasure caused by the non-fulfillment of one's expectations or hopes. It's kind of like when we go to the latest remake, sequel, prequel, alternate reality version, 12th version of our favorite movie, and we expect that it's going to be as good as the original. And then we see it, and it's not. And we're just disappointed. And that's how we feel about little things, little disappointment. What happens when we face great disappointment? See, that is a pain that can make us feel wrecked. Because it's like all of our hopes were just dashed to pieces. And if that happens often enough, our disappointment starts turning into fear. A fear of disappointment. To the point where it can even become this anxiety that paralyzes our life because we don't know if we can handle another disappointment. I don't want to go to school because what if I fail and I find out that I'm not as smart as everyone thinks that I am? I don't want to go hang out with these friends because what if I say something stupid? Or I can't let people close to me because what if I find out I really am as unlovable as I think that I am? Growing up, my dad struggled with addiction. And here's two things I have never doubted about my dad. One is that he loves me, and two, he is proud of me. But because of his addiction, he just wasn't always healthy. And that means that he didn't always make the healthiest decisions. And honestly, that left me with a lot of disappointment. And that disappointment started turning to fear. And at times, even anxiety. Because what if he doesn't come home? What if he gets hurt? What if my parents get divorced? What if they don't? What if he never gets better? And as hard as it was to feel all of that disappointment and even fear, I think it was even harder to feel that way about God. Because I would pray so hard. And I would get so frustrated because, God, I know you're good. I know that you love me. I know you're powerful. Why is this happening? Why are we going through this? Why won't you just heal him? What the heck, God? Because we start to expect it from other people to let us down. But what do we do when it feels like God's not going to come through? And when I think about that, I think about Mary. There are a billion Marys in the Bible, by the way. I don't know why this name was so popular back then, but it is. I don't know. Well, this Mary is sisters with Martha and Lazarus, and they're all friends with Jesus to the point where they would throw parties for Jesus. And Martha, she's running around doing all this stuff. But Mary is just sitting at Jesus' feet listening. That's how close that they are. And one day, Lazarus gets sick. And so Mary and Martha, they write Jesus a letter and they send him a note and they say, Lord, the one you love is sick. Please come. And here's what Mary is expecting. Mary's just expecting Jesus to come and heal her brother. He loves us. He's actually only a couple miles down the road. He does this all the time. This is easy. But that's not what happens. Jesus waits. In fact, he waits days. And when he finally does show up, Lazarus has been dead and buried in a tomb for 4 days. So Martha goes out to meet Jesus. But Mary, she hangs back. Could you imagine the disappointment that Mary must be feeling? Her brother is going through all this pain. And if I'm Mary, I'm not worried. Yeah, it looks bad, but any moment, Jesus is going to show up and he's going to make it better. This is going to be nothing. And he doesn't. And she has to watch her brother die. So yeah, when Jesus shows up, she stays in the house. And to be honest, we do the same thing. When God doesn't do what we want him to do, it wrecks us. Because it feels like every anxiety I had about God just came true. What if you're really not good? What if you really don't love me? What if you're like every other person in my life who just lets me down? Disappointment sets in. And even the fear of disappointment, it stops us from coming to God. And for some of us, that what if he doesn't show up, that's the reason you don't want God at all. Disappointment turns into fear. Fear turns into anxiety, and it holds us back. Because hope is just too painful. I can imagine that Mary is feeling all of these same feelings, and that's okay. What's important is that she does not stay there. She comes to Jesus, disappointment and all. In fact, this is what it says in John chapter 11, verses 32 through 35. It says, when Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet. Everyone say, fell at his feet. And said, Lord, if you would have been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. Where have you laid him? He asked. Come and see, Lord, they replied. And Jesus wept. You have permission to bring Jesus your pain and your questions. You have permission to bring Jesus your disappointment. See, he let Mary cry. He let her vent. Even though he already knew what he was about to do, he didn't dismiss her. He didn't belittle her. He didn't say, get over it. No, he cried with her because he loved her and her pain mattered to him. See, Jesus meets us in our disappointment. And even though he already knows the good things that he has planned for you, he will meet you in your disappointment too, because he loves you. He loves you. But the cool thing is that Jesus doesn't just meet us in our disappointment. He resurrects our disappointment. Because after he comforted Mary, he turned around and did one of the greatest miracles he has ever done. And he brought Lazarus back to life. You see, this is what they were expecting. Jesus just come heal Lazarus. But he didn't do that. No, instead, he turned around and he brought him back from the dead. He brought hope where there was no hope. He brought peace where there was no peace. He brought life where there was no life. And he healed and he did more in other people's lives because he didn't do what he expected them to do. And he did more through Mary. You see, through her disappointment, he didn't just do something for her. He did something in her. And we know that because it shows us afterwards they do what they do. They throw Jesus another party. And Mary, she's back at Jesus' feet. But this time she's not just listening. In a great act of worship, she takes the most expensive thing she has. It's just a bottle of perfume. And she pours it on Jesus' feet. And she wipes his feet with her hair, symbolizing that Jesus, you can have everything. He didn't do what Mary expected him to do. No, he exceeded her expectations. And because of that, through her disappointment, he deepened their relationship. They went from listening at his feet to crying at his feet to laying down her life at his feet. You know, I told you earlier about my dad, and God did not do what I wanted him to do when I wanted him to do it. He actually did something more. Because I went through that, I had to seek God. And when I did, he gave me peace when I needed peace. He gave me hope when I needed hope. He gave me strength when I needed strength. And he healed my hurt. And now, I don't think I would have the relationship with God that I do if I hadn't gone through that. So what about you? Are you disappointed because things didn't go the way that you wanted them to? Are you disappointed because what's happening to you or what has happened to you? Are you letting that turn into this anxiety that holds back and controls your life? What do we do when it feels like God's not gonna come through? We're gonna be disappointed sometimes. But unfortunately, so many of us have let us rob our hope. We've let our disappointment and our anxiety affect our life and keep us stuck. But God wants to meet you in your disappointment. He wants to bring life and hope where you need it. And do more in and through you than you ever expected possible. So how are you gonna deal with your disappointment? Are you gonna lean back, stay away? Or are you gonna lean in and allow God to meet you there?
Disappointment is absolutely an invitation for fear or anxiety to set in. But I think it's also important that we see disappointment as an invitation for God to meet us right where we are. So what parts of your life feel wrecked?
Yeah, where do you need to invite God into that chaos? Like, what would happen if you took that risk and invited him in to see what he could do? Disappointment is unavoidable and it's real, but God wants to meet you there. So will you let him bring hope? Have a good week.